Disclaimer: this video and my entire channel is not intended for children under the age of 13. If you are under the age of 13, be sure to watch my channel with your parents, or at least make sure that you have parental consent. You have been warned. Disclaimer: this video is for entertainment and educational purposes only. All media in this video belongs to its respective copyright owners. All media is linked in the description of this video. Please enjoy the video.
The power on the dark side.
Hello everyone, what's up? It's Luke here. It's a new year, new profile picture, a new banner and all that. I'm back with a new video. And this video is going to be yet another video about the rock and roll quartet that is Queen. I know this is my fourth video concerning Queen now. However, two of the three previous videos I made concerning Queen kind of catalogue the early days and peak period of Queen's career. The bulk of this video, however, is going to focus on Queen after the passing of Freddie Mercury. However, I think it's best we do a mini recap of Queen's peak to when Freddie passed away, regardless. I'm actually going to start off with a quick summary of Queen's peak period. So, after the 20-minute showstopper of Queen's career, that was their Live Aid performance in 1985, that gave the band a shot in the arm, to quote Brian May, and Queen returned to Munich, where they recorded One Vision.
It was a shot in the arm, and we went back in the studio. Of course, we were back in Munich, with all its attendant dangers, so we tried to keep ourselves in the studio as much as possible.
This track, along with several others from the movie Highlander, were also on their 1986 album, A Kind of Magic. Along with that album flying off the shelves in places like Budapest, the Magic Tour as a whole was Queen's grandest tour, and it was the first time Queen's touring history in which they'd managed to gain profit off of that. So it seemed as if things were on the up and up for Queen after their performance at Live Aid. However, behind the scenes and unknown to the band during and after the Magic Tour, Freddie Mercury's health was on an immense decline.
I just got the vibe from Freddie. He felt that he wasn't maybe able to do anymore. I think he had an idea that he might not be terribly well.
However, Freddie didn't wallow away. He soldiered on, and Queen gave us two more albums before Freddie's passing, those being 1989's The Miracle and 1991's Innuendo. Then came November 24th of 1991, when Freddie passed away.
Freddie Mercury died last night of AIDS. There have been tributes to his talent and his courage from friends and from fans.
This was a massive slash in the heart around the world, and was particularly brutal on those who knew Freddie personally, those people including the likes of Jim Hutton, Mary Austin, and of course Queen's remaining members, drummer Roger Taylor, guitarist Brian May, and bassist John Deacon. Despite the tragedy of this, however, this didn't stop the remaining members of Queen from saying whatever they could to defend Queen's now deceased frontman.
We do feel absolutely bound to stick up for him, because he can't stick up for himself anymore.
They released a double A-side with Bohemian Rhapsody and These Are the Days of Our Lives, the latter of which was from their, at the time, newest album Innuendo. This was an instance where everyone had foregone a profit off of this release, and every single penny of the revenue that double A-side generated was invested into research concerning AIDS.
We're putting out this record of it, which is a memorial to him, re-releasing the Bohemian Rhapsody thing, and all the proceeds will go to the AIDS charity, Terence Higgins Trust.
Everyone has foregone a profit on this.
Yes,
all the money goes.
Donating all of their side as well, so every penny is going towards the Terence Higgins Trust.
The interview you guys have just seen clips from was also the interview in which the first tease of a very iconic event in music history came to be.
We're thinking of doing something next year, some kind of event you know, probably in his name, that will be something positive and will raise a lot of money, we hope.
After the passing of Freddie Mercury, both Brian May and John Deacon were unsure about doing a tribute show to Freddie.
Is it true that John didn't want to do it?
John wasn't sure about the wisdom of doing it, and Brian didn't want to do it.
However, that didn't stop Roger Taylor from having the fire to get the ball rolling for such an event.
Roger got the ball rolling. Roger got up one morning and said, look, we're doing this, right? And made a few phone calls.
And Brian said, well, if you can get that lot, I'll come.
We hope that a lot of you will be able to join us on April the 20th at Wembley Stadium for a celebration of Freddie's life and career. You're all welcome. Please join us.
As such, Queen got themselves into gear, phoned up a gathering of guest artists, and come April 20th of 1992, the Freddie Mercury tribute concert happened. The intentions were as such: 1, to celebrate Freddie's legacy, and to raise awareness of AIDS.
We're here tonight to celebrate the life and work and dreams of one Freddie Mercury.
Today is for Freddie, it's for you, it's to tell everybody around the world that AIDS affects us all.
The guest artists included the likes of Def Leppard's Joe Elliott, Metallica's James Hetfield, Led Zeppelin's Robert Plant, Elton John, and George Michael, among others. After that show, Queen disbanded and went their separate ways. After Queen disbanded, Brian May went off and toured as both the frontman and guitarist for the Brian May Band, who had originally formed shortly before Freddie Mercury's death, and Roger Taylor continued his music career with The Cross, a group he originally formed in 1986, and did his own solo albums. However, come 1993, The Cross was disbanded and Taylor resumed his solo career. Also, it seemed as if there was some form of conflict between Roger and Brian at the time. Roger believed, come 93, that mourning Freddie's loss had its allowance period and that Queen would go again.
I think we're actually now coming to the point where Queen will be going again. And I think, you know, we'll never get over Freddie, but I think the period of mourning is past.
However, according to a commenter whose name I shall keep anonymous, Brian wasn't initially comfortable of Queen going on without Freddie, so, you know, the whole Queen plus idea, essentially. There was also a point where, when Roger thought of playing under the Queen name, with or without Brian May.
It's time for a new leaf and a fresh look at it, and John and I will definitely be carrying things on. With or without Brian, it's up to him.
So it could have been Roger and Deaky carrying on the Queen mantle rather than Roger and Brian. Just a possibility there. However, Roger did actually play at a charity show with Queen bandmate John Deacon, which was also again in 1993. And from there, well, there was nothing from Queen until 2 years afterwards. In 1995, 4 years after Freddie's passing, Brian May, Roger Taylor and John Deacon returned to the recording studio and used material from both Freddie's solo work and unfinished Queen material from before Freddie passed away to make another album, that being Made in Heaven. The standout track of Made in Heaven is probably considered by most to be Mother Love. Innuendo was released, and after that point Freddie became all the more insistent on having material to work on while in the studio. This led to Mother Love being conceived very much on the spot.
I know I don't have very long. Keep writing me words, keep giving me things. I will sing, I will sing. So I was writing on scraps of paper these lines of Mother Love.
Freddie was pushing himself more and more. This led to him singing to the cosmos, basically, in the middle of that song, metaphorically speaking, of course. If you want to listen to Mother Love, and the same goes for any of the other songs mentioned in this video, links are in the description. During the recording of Mother Love, Freddie made it to just before the last verse, by which point he was burnt out.
And we got to the last verse and he said, "Oh, I'm not up to this now, I need to go away and have a rest. I'll come back and finish it off, you know." And he never came back.
As you heard there, Brian said that Freddie couldn't bring himself to finish the last verse and promised to finish the vocals for Mother Love. However, that didn't happen. So that's why, in case anyone is curious, you hear Brian sing the end of Mother Love and not Freddie. Queen went back on hiatus again after the release of Made in Heaven. Two years after the release of Made in Heaven, we now come to September of 1997. The remaining members of Queen were asked by Maurice Béjart to perform at the Béjart Ballet. This was something that they ultimately agreed to do.
We talked about being there and we said we'd like to be there.
However, of course, Queen no longer had Freddie at this point. However, it was then that Superstar and Freddie Mercury tribute concert guest Elton John came calling and said, "Let's play."
Firstly, we haven't played for God knows how long. We don't have our singer. And then this message came from Elton saying, "Let's play."
Fun fact for you, this actually caused speculation within the news at the time that Queen and Elton would be doing a series of concerts together. Don't believe me? Here's the clip.
According to the newspapers, this is the first in a series of concerts they're doing together.
Series of concerts, yeah.
The number they played was the closing track of Innuendo for this show, that being The Show Must Go On. Along with this, that show marked the last live performance that John Deacon ever did.
At the end of it, he says, "I can never do this again. I can't do this." And it was true. That's the last time he ever played with us, John, in public.
Now we come to October of 1997, just 1 month after the Queen plus Elton John Béjart Ballet performance. This song that I'm talking about here dates several months back in the context of the year in which it came out. No One But You was recorded by Brian May, and he gave the recording to Roger. The song was written in honour of Freddie, but also the recently, at that time, deceased Princess Diana. It wasn't until months after being given that recording in which Roger listened to it, and lo and behold, he liked it. Then Roger suggested that No One But You should be recorded as a Queen song.
He put it away in a drawer somewhere, you know. And it was months later when Roger phoned up suddenly, excited, and said, "I just listened to the track and it's amazing and we have to do it as a Queen song." It was the time when Princess Diana had just died, and he listened to it and he could hear it was about Freddie, and he could also hear it was about Princess Diana.
Then Queen's remaining members were reunited, and they recorded No One But You, Only the Good Die Young together. After this, Queen disbanded again, and John Deacon officially retired from both recording and performing. Now we're jumping to the early 2000s with this next event. This particular event was an anniversary gig in 2004, honouring 50 years of the Fender Stratocaster guitar. The bill for the event was MD'd by Brian May. The bill had guitarists who were fans of the 1960s blues rock band Free. Those guitarists were fans of the rock anthem All Right Now. Because of this, Brian reached out to Free and Bad Company's very own frontman, that being Paul Rodgers, to take on lead vocals for that track. Brian also took on lead guitar for that performance.
It was the 50th anniversary of the Fender Stratocaster. Paul was going to sing All Right Now, and they invited me to play guitar with him.
After that performance, Paul Rodgers' significant other said to him and Brian about how there was chemistry between the two on stage, and all they would need was a drummer.
All you need is a drummer, right? And I said, yeah, as a matter of fact, I know a drummer. I phoned Roger that night and said, you know, the one thing we never thought of, which would be so interesting and so great if it happened, would be if we teamed up with Paul Rodgers.
Then we jumped to September of that year, when Queen were inducted into the UK Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Brian and Roger, under the Queen banner, played News of the World anthems, We Will Rock You and We Are the Champions, and the free hit All Right Now with Paul Rodgers. After that show, Brian was sold on touring as Queen with Paul Rodgers. From there, the Queen plus Paul Rodgers era was born, and they did various gigs and a couple of world tours. This collaboration also gave Queen fans a brand new album, a taste of which was given on the Al Murray's Happy Hour show, where they played Celebrity. The album itself was called The Cosmos Rocks, and it was released in 2008, 13 years after Made in Heaven, and there was a Queen plus Paul Rodgers tour in support of that album. Now, I will forewarn anyone who wants to give that album a shot. It's basically a blues rock album with some sparks of classic Queen thrown on there. And it's something of an acquired taste as well. If you don't like blues rock, you may not enjoy the album that much. If you're like me, someone who likes Queen, Free and Bad Company, you may enjoy it. With that said, again, if you don't really like blues rock, you may not enjoy it. However, I do have something to say concerning those who really disliked Paul Rodgers during his stint with Queen. I honestly think that a fair chunk of people who disliked Paul Rodgers during his period with Queen were classic Queen extremists who have a very elitist mindset when it comes to putting Freddie on such a godly pedestal. There are indeed people out there who think that people who have stood in Freddie's shoes are inferior to Freddie, and even if that's the case, you have to be open-minded to when people do their own interpretations of someone else's songs. And unfortunately, Paul Rodgers, he was no exception to the hatred from people about this whole thing. There are people who think Paul Rodgers didn't do all that good of a job, and I would personally argue that isn't the case. To anyone who is anti-Paul Rodgers, he is actually a megastar in his own right. You have things like All Right Now, Wishing Well, and The Stealer from Free, but then on the Bad Company side, which of those two bands he's probably most known for, to be fair? You have songs like Rock and Roll Fantasy, Honey Child, Shooting Star, Can't Get Enough of Your Love, and Burning Sky, just to name a few. Now, I am aware that even Brian May himself has said that the Paul Rodgers period of Queen didn't really work, but here is what may be a surprise to those who aren't very familiar with Paul Rodgers. He and the bands he's most known for, obviously, were in fact inspirations of Queen.
We grew up on Free and Bad Company. Freddie was a big fan of Bad Company. Fire and Water as an album was one of our Bibles, I have to say. And I remember Freddie listening to Paul's delivery and the way he engaged an audience, the way he would ad-lib. Freddie loved the way Paul sang.
As such, I can't help but wonder if, in the context of Queen, Paul Rodgers doesn't get the credit that he deserves. And this may be a bit cheeky of me to say. However, to the Queen fans who didn't like Paul Rodgers, or rather those who were so close-minded to not appreciate his approach on Queen's catalogue, I genuinely think that those people should consider themselves lucky that Queen decided to break through that Miracle Express wall and continue touring, which is obviously still happening today with Adam Lambert. Just one more thing, though. Queen realised that their legacy had to keep going, regardless of having lost Freddie. I'll let Paul Rodgers himself summarise what I mean. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. So until then, goodbye, you've been warned, and keep on rocking.